Hi everyone, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Francesca Spinosi. I am a climate leader at the Climate Reality Project since August this year, and I'm part of the Italian and European branch. But I have been also liaising with the Korean district lately because I've been working for almost 2 years now at the Korean-based Green Climate Fund, which is the financial mechanism of the UNFCCC created to serve the Paris Agreement. So for today, I would like to share my screen with you to have some brief discussions about climate finance and the Green Climate Fund in the context of COVID-19. So I'm very pleased to have been given the opportunity to join the Climate Social Forum discussions. Today, I would like to share some insights with respect to how and why in this particular point in time, climate finance is key in that what decision the financial world takes today will determine if we will be able to meet the Paris goals, and ultimately they will be able to shape the future of mankind. So I would like to start just setting the scene very briefly to see where we are. As you know, we have been recently celebrating the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, and countries are preparing for the approaching COP26 next year. Also, Joe Biden has been reelected, and he committed to rejoin the Paris Agreement once it steps into the White House in January. And he is going to commit the US to reach zero carbon electricity by 2035. But also China, Japan, and South Korea recently announced targets of net zero emissions by mid-century. So this is a very strong political signal to the entire world. Also, by January, most of the big global economies, including the EU and the UK, will have some form of net zero target. If all these countries will meet their long-term targets of net zero, then warming of 2.1 degrees is now likely by the end of the century. So this is much lower than seemed likely only a few years ago. And these are as per the estimates of the New Climate Institute and Climate Analytics. Also, very importantly, never before public funds have been spent in the magnitude that they have been spent in response to the pandemic. And this will bring lots of opportunities in terms of greening our world. So climate finance in the era of COVID-19. We are in an unprecedented point in time. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought us to a tipping point or turning point in our fight against climate change. Decisions taken by leaders to revive economies will either entrench our dependence on fossil fuels or put us on a path to achieve the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. So this is an opportunity to building forward rather than to build back better. It's an opportunity to shift our economies towards low emission and climate resilient development pathways, which will in turn enable us to decouple greenhouse gas emissions from economic growth. So according to the IPCC, limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees is still narrowly possible. And this could create between 1.8 to 4.5 trillion USD in green investment opportunities annually over the next 2 decades. So we have seen a steady increase in climate investments over the past decade, exceeding the USD $500 billion mark for the first time, both in 2017 and 2018. However, the increase, as you know, is still too slow to channel financial resources towards low carbon resilient development at the scale and pace required to achieve the Paris goals. So equally concerning, the top 33 banks alone allocated USD 650 billion to fossil fuels financing in the year 2018. And similarly, an IMF study found that 2019 equity evaluations across countries did not reflect projected incidence of climate, physical, and transition risks. So what is the problem here? What are the barriers to climate finance? First of all, green investments tend to have higher upfront capital expenditure and longer payback periods compared to conventional investments. They can also have higher sensitivity to policy changes and technology than conventional investments. So these additional and perceived risks should be balanced against the lower operational costs of many green investments and lower exposure to climate risks. However, pricing climate risks is providing a daunting challenge for project initiators and financiers alike, who are basically asked to estimate the likelihood of various climate scenarios and their implication for climate risks at the firm and at the project level. And as you can imagine, this is quite a challenging exercise. So, but what is the Green Climate Fund and what is its role in addressing these barriers? So the Green Climate Fund is the financial mechanism of the UNFCCC. The GCF mandate is to foster a paradigm shift towards low emission, climate resilient development pathways in developing countries. And this very peculiar mandate is what actually motivated me to join the fund 1.5 years ago. So GCF and its partners are committed to foster a green resilient recovery based on global solidarity. So by de-risking investments, the GCF can help developing countries to maintain climate ambition in the area of COVID-19. The GCF was established in 2010 back at COP16, but since then it has grown to become the largest dedicated climate fund. And we have now approved 159 projects across 117 countries. And for its first replenishment, which will cover here a programming period from 2020 to 2033, GCF has already received pledges of over 9.98 USD. So what is the GCF doing to address these barriers? So the GCF is leveraging public funds to increase private investment by removing barriers that are preventing the financial shifts that are needed around the world. One way in which the fund is driving such investment changes is through blended finance. So blended finance structures are potentially powerful tools to catalyze private finance by using scarce public resources to de-risk green investment opportunities. However, blended finance so far has mostly benefited high and middle income countries, largely bypassing least developing countries and small island developing states, and has catalyzed private investment in mature technologies such as on-grid renewable energy power plants. So GCF projects are now piloting new forms of blended finance to address the current shortcomings of our system. For example, the GCF is engaged in the development of pioneer equity funds to catalyze private investment in ecosystem conservation, including land neutrality and coral reef funds that are the key barriers to sustainable development in least developing countries and small islands developing states. A few examples of successful GCF projects. For example, GCF is helping Chile to move away from its dependence on fossil fuels by investing in an innovative combination of solar energy and pumped storage hydroelectricity to generate 24-hour baseload power. This project, co-financed by Japan's MUFG Bank, addresses the challenge with renewable energy of intermittent power supply. By investing up to USD 60 million in early stage equity, the GCF de-risks the project and catalyzes much larger private sector financing. This will help to attract additional private sector debt and equity investors to finance the remaining USD 1 billion. At the same time, GCF is collaborating with an impact investor in Africa to overcome barriers and attract private sector funding for initiatives that enhance climate resilience. The Acumen Resilient Agriculture Fund is a fund designed to shift investments in adaptations activities from grants to long-term capital, enabling smallholder farmers to respond to climate change more effectively. So ARAF Fund supports entrepreneurs in micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and Uganda by providing farmers with innovative financial services, including microinsurance and mobile payments. So what are GCF results and impacts so far? Oh, sorry. So the GCF so far invested in 7.2 billion USD mitigation and adaptation projects across more than 110 countries. If we include co-financing, this adds up to USD 23.2 billion. And in terms of impact, this translates into avoided 1.2 gigatons of CO2 equivalent and into more than 400 million people with increased resilience to climate change. But the GCF alone is clearly not enough to meet the zero carbon goals by 2050. So what is needed to reach the zero carbon future? So to achieve the Paris targets, we need both public and private finance. So as you know, the private sector brings not only capital, but also know-how, innovation, technology. So our economy is market-based. So the private sector makes most of the relevant decisions in our economy. And how the private sector makes these decisions will determine the future and whether or not we will be able to meet the Paris goals. So how can we catalyze private investment towards a green resilient pathway? So first of all, we need financial incentives, both carrots and sticks. So we need also penalties. If someone keeps on using coal-fired power plants electricity generation, then they need to pay, They don't need to be incentivized for that. But at the same time, we need changes in legal frameworks, such as the requirement of disclosure of carbon risks. As an example, New Zealand has made mandatory the disclosure of climate risks information. So we are in a very particular moment now, and we also need to make sure that there are changes in corporate governance, which is still focused on the short term, but needs to be incentivized to be looking towards the long term of society. So this is a very particular point in time. So never before public funds have been spent in the magnitude that they are being spent in response to the pandemic. Citizens and us have now the right to demand that the money need to be spent to reshape our economy towards green resilient pathways. Green investments are timely, are labor intensive. They have large multipliers, as we have seen for the GCF. So green investments must be the key part of the recovery, because if we invest in green investments opportunities, we will be able not only to fix the climate crisis, but also the biodiversity crisis, the economic crisis, the health crisis, and the equality crisis. So those funds can tackle multiple purposes. So not only recover from COVID, but enable us to recover greener with more equality and more resilience. So this is an extremely important point in time. And I would like, therefore, to leave you with the message of hope, because we can make the difference. So 2020 starts as the most decisive decade in humankind. 2020 is a wake-up call. COVID-19 reminded us that we have 10 years to design the future of humanity. So if by 2030 we are not able to cut our emissions by 50%, we will be condemning our future generations to destruction. So I would like to quote here Christiana Figueres, because the message is really straightforward. Wherever finance goes, this is where emissions go or don't go. So the characteristic of finance will determine whether emissions will continue to rise or whether they will decline, and we will be then able to reach the Paris goals. So the good news is that companies and financial institutes finally understood that profit is not antithetical to societal and environmental protection. Actually, we understood that profit and growth depend on social and environmental protection, and that the 3 Ps, people, planet, and profit, are indivisible, and we need to work with this indivisible package to move towards a safer, fairer, and greener world. So this is the growth story of our century, and it's exciting. It's an incredible opportunity to reinvest, to reset human engagement with our economy. And it is us who are now joining this conference today who can actually make the difference. How can we make the difference? We need to deliver those messages that I shared with you today. We need to demand for greening the economic stimulus measure. We need to ensure that developing countries can access those measures, and we need to ensure that public and private partnership will play a central role. So this is key because your word depends on it. We need your help to deliver this message. Don't forget that wherever finance goes, that is where emissions go or don't go. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention today. And I wish that everyone attending this international conference will benefit from a lot of productive and enlightening discussion. Thank you very much. Have a great day.